Welcome to Module 2. Go ahead and get comfortable and in a good position for breathing and relaxation as I play this quick meditation and affirmation.
Come to a comfortable position where you can meditate for the next 2 minutes. Let your eyes begin to soften or even draw closed. Take a nice deep inhale through the nose and exhale, releasing tension out of the mouth. And begin to draw your awareness to the physical body. Just notice how you're feeling in your body in this moment. Releasing all judgment around it and just observing. Begin to draw your awareness now to your breath. What is the quality of your breath? Is it quick or slow? Just observing that. Next, drawing your awareness to the energy in your body and how you're feeling in this moment. Is your energy stuck anywhere, and can you breathe into that? Next, drawing your awareness to your emotional body and how you are feeling. Observing what you are feeling. And again, detaching judgment from this, but just breathing into this. Finally, drawing your awareness to the center of your belly, perhaps even placing a hand there. And notice how you are feeling right now. Tuning in to any sensations you might be feeling, if you're hungry or thirsty, tired or stressed. And just allow that intuitive connection to your gut guide you and allow you to move in a way that is conscious throughout the rest of your day. Take a nice deep breath in through the nose. Exhale it out the mouth. Gently open your eyes and come back into your space.
Let's go ahead and get started with a recap from our last module, Module 1. Just as a reminder, this is a journey, not a destination. I will probably say that multiple times throughout this course. Transition from a focus on weight to a focus on your health habits, your health behaviors. Diets lurk in many forms. And dieting undermines our abilities to listen to and trust our bodies. Important reminders: intuitive eating is not a diet. It's not rigid. There's no rules with intuitive eating. Some intentions from the last time were really to start to be aware of negative self-talk or just your internal dialogue as a whole. What is it like? Is it generally more negative, more positive, more neutral? Simply becoming aware of the negative internal dialogue we have is a great place to start. Down the road, we're going to work on what to do with that internal dialogue. But for now, just try to turn it into something more positive if you notice that it's negative. If that's too much for you, simply try to make it more neutral and ask yourself how that negative self-talk is affecting you in the moment and even your day as a whole. Here's an example of maybe turning a negative internal dialogue or self-talk into something more neutral or positive. I cannot believe I just ate that cake. I wasn't even hungry. I'm such a failure. That might be changed to, I ate a piece of cake, even though I wasn't hungry. Well, at least I enjoyed it. Again, something a little bit more neutral and not so negative. How did you do with your dieting history worksheet on page 19? Question 4, did you notice any dieting trends? After going over what constitutes diet mentality and knowing now that really any type of restriction can be a diet, have you been on more diets than you thought? Just reviewing your diet history, how long you were on each diet, whether you gained weight back and how much, and how you felt each time during that diet, it may help you see more clearly that diets just aren't serving you. Dieting tools may look different than what you thought. Your body scales and food scales are diet tools because they provide that what I call external cue or external tool for monitoring food intake. In other words, you base how much you eat based on your weight for that day or the recommended serving size. That's how you're basing how much you're going to eat that day or what you're going to eat that day. That's an external cue. The time on the clock is another external cue or method for choosing when to eat instead of just eating when you're actually hungry. Food labels are also a dieting tool. You read the food label and that can affect how much you consume. In other words, does it have a lot of calories? I need to consume less. Does it have few calories? Oh boy, I can eat the whole bag. And these are all external cues that are really going to get in the way of you listening to that internal cue, those internal cues of hunger and fullness. We'll talk about hunger today. We'll talk about fullness a little bit later. Were you able to give up any dieting tools? This was a difficult assignment. If you were able to give something up, way to go. Let's see if you can continue without that tool. If you were not able to give something up, that's okay too. Remember, have self-compassion. Telling yourself you're a failure will only make things worse. Be kind to yourself and remind yourself that you are here working on your wellness and intuitive eating, and that's a huge step right there. You'll eventually, with time and persistence and positive self-talk, get to a point where you can start giving up those dieting tools. Everyone does so at their own comfortable pace. Let's talk about the next principle, honor your hunger. Key concepts for today include interoceptive awareness, self-care and nourishment, attunement disruptors, biological and primal hunger. And let's start with interoceptive awareness. Basically what this is it's the innate ability that we all have, which includes perceiving the physical cues of hunger and satiety, bodily states such as rapid heartbeat, a full bladder, and the physical sensations produced by emotions like a rush of heat or a jitteriness when you feel panicked. The principles of intuitive eating are meant to cultivate interoceptive awareness or help you get rid of any barriers that might get in the way of that awareness. Researchers use participants' ability to perceive their heart rate without noticing or touching their body. Without touching their body. So people's ability to perceive their heart rate without touching their pulse or touching their heart as a way to measure interoceptive awareness or body attunement is another way I like to call it. And in the book, they use that term too. So this is something you can come back to down the road, this activity. Once you're further into this course, you might actually notice that your attunement is better. So I want you to go ahead and pause this course and try the activity on page 35. You are going to see if you can notice an accurate heart rate for yourself simply by breathing, closing your eyes, and trying to feel your heart rate or your pulse without actually physically touching yourself. Let's talk about self-care. On page 41 to 44, there's a self-care assessment. Take a look at the different ways that you can engage in self-care. This self-care assessment looks at your current wellness and self-care through a physical, emotional, and psychological, relationship, spiritual, and boundaries lens. Notice there are two sections. The first is those positive behaviors, which are behaviors that help with interoceptive awareness or whole body attunement. Then there's the section that talks about attunement disruptors or interoceptive awareness disruptors. They're really going to take away your ability to notice subtle signs of hunger or fullness or any other subtle signs that your body is giving you. Self-care is an important cornerstone of intuitive eating that will be woven throughout this journey. We'll come back to this assessment often, but go ahead and pause this training to take a look at the self-care assessment. Here are some important parts of self-care: getting adequate sleep, finding a good work-life balance, taking time to truly relax, creating strong relationships, nurturing yourself. Again, go ahead and pause if you haven't already and take the self-care assessment on pages 41 through 44. Let's talk about nourishment. Is nourishment self-care? It absolutely is. Nourishment is self-care. How do you nourish yourself? Eat every 3 to 5 hours. That's super important. And we'll talk about this when it comes to getting back in touch with your hunger. If you're someone who likes to skip meals, it's really hard to be in touch with what hunger feels like. So giving yourself that consistent nourishment throughout the day is incredibly important. Waiting no longer than 5 minutes. Eat when you're busy or sick or anything else gets in the way. Don't ignore your hunger. What about diets? Are diets self-care? Do you think that you were nourished during your last diet? Because diets all involve some type of a restriction. Chances are you were not nourished. Diets are themselves not self-care. Diets are attunement disruptors or things in your life that prevent you from noticing those subtle signals of your body. The diet tools are also attunement disruptors. So all those diet tools we talked about at the last module, and then the activity that you worked on in between, those are attunement disruptors, and they get in the way of our interoceptive awareness. In other words, the things we discussed earlier, such as labels, scales, food scales, and the clock, can all play a role in preventing you from listening to your body and trusting that your body knows what is best. Diet tools are more likely to cause you to second guess the needs of your body. So by now, you've taken the self-care assessment and know your opportunities. But let's get more specific with some areas that are clear attunement disruptors, which again, are things that may prevent you from noticing those subtle signals that your body gives you of hunger, fullness, and so many other things. One of those disruptors are distractions. When you're distracted, specifically when you eat, such as the picture in this on this slide, it's really hard to notice hunger or fullness. What about thoughts, rules, and beliefs? If you're distracted by diet, rules, thoughts, or beliefs about food or your body, you may ignore hunger or fullness cues, either on purpose or without even knowing. Dieting actively disrupts and undermines our ability to listen to and trust our body. Instead of stopping when we're full, we stop when we reached a certain amount of points, or we stop because the label said, I should only eat this much. Instead of eating when physically hungry, we ignore our hunger because maybe it's not yet 1 p.m. and our diet says we have to wait for 12 hours to go by. Instead of giving ourselves permission to eat the piece of wedding cake, we skip it because the scale told us something we didn't want to see today. Those are just some examples. And then, of course, we've already talked about this. Lack of self-care can be an attunement disruptor. And by now, you know the areas that you have for opportunity to improve your self-care. So as mentioned in the previous slides, a lack of self-care can negatively impact your attunement and interoceptive awareness of those body signals. A lack of self-care may also make food more rewarding. Did you know that? This also impacts how much food it will take you to feel content and satisfied. We'll talk about that more in later modules. All right, so today we're talking about honoring your hunger. So let's talk about hunger. We've discussed interoceptive awareness and the ability to notice those nuanced signals our body gives us. But now let's take a deep dive into one of those important signals, which is hunger. Hunger refers to the biological need to eat food. What's biological hunger? Biological hunger refers to cues originating from the body saying it needs nourishment and it's time to eat. What about primal hunger? When we ignore our biological hunger, primal hunger takes over. Think of the last time you were dehydrated or underwater for a long period of time. If you were dehydrated, you get around water and you have a primal urge to drink it. If you're underwater for a long time, maybe playing a game, who can do as many more flips underwater? I do that with my daughter often. But when I'm finished and I had that primal urge to breathe, I come up and I take a big gasp of air. The same thing happens when we have a primal urge to eat because we've ignored our biological hunger. Let's talk about silenced hunger. If your hunger is silenced too often, it can go dormant. If you ignore your biological hunger often enough, your body will stop giving you those hunger signals. When you become so far removed from those internal cues of hunger, solely focusing on those external cues, time on the clock, habit, labels, your hunger can be silenced and you may no longer be able to tell when your body is asking for food. Here's the thing. Diet culture wants us to believe that not having hunger is key to our best life. In truth, when your hunger is silenced, it's a sign that something is off. If you don't notice hunger, as we mentioned above, you likely have a lack of self-care or you're entrenched in some type of a diet or diet mentality. Silenced hunger often means a lack of proper nourishment, which in the long run will prevent you from being your best self. And instead of thriving, you're just surviving. The good news is you can unsilence your hunger, and that's what we're going to discuss next. Let's talk about hunger, body, mind connection. So as your attunement and awareness improves, you may notice more subtle cues of hunger. Your stomach is the most common sign of hunger, that slight growling that you have in your stomach, that emptiness feeling. You might notice a sign in your head, maybe a dull headache, or your mind, you're thinking about food more often. Your energy, you may notice that you don't really have much and you feel a little bit lethargic. If you notice any of these signs, it's a good idea to start considering food. Some of these may be signs that you're actually overly hungry, but that really depends on you. For example, if I get to the point where I have low energy and maybe I've waited too long, or if I have a headache, for me, my very first sign is that subtle growling in the stomach. But again, that's different for everyone. Let's look at the hunger scale. The hunger scale goes from 0 to 10. 0 meaning you're painfully hungry, you haven't eaten in way too long. 10 meaning you're so overly full and stuffed, which I will talk about more in some subsequent models when we talk about fullness and what that feels like. It's going to be ideal to eat when you're around that 3 or 4. You're hungry and ready to eat, but it's not urgent. What are some reasons we might go past that on the hunger? We might wait till that 2, for example. And what happens when we get to that 2 on the hunger scale? So think about that. And then it's ideal to stop eating when you're around a 6 to 7. You're beginning to sense fullness emerging. It's comfortable. You feel satisfied and content. But what might cause you to eat well beyond this comfortable fullness? I want to reiterate that these are not rules. If you eat when you're at a 0 or 1 currently, it's okay. We're just going to work on, generally speaking, eating more often when you're at that 3 or 4 and becoming more aware of that. If you eat past that 6, 7 comfortable fullness, again, these modules will help you become more aware of that so you can more consistently eat to that 6 to 7. Even the best, quote unquote, intuitive eater will not eat, to a 6 to 7 at some point and may wait too long to eat at times. It happens to everyone. So these are questions that you will start to pay attention to as you fill out the hunger discovery scale as part of your self-study assignments that I will give to you at the end of today's module. You may notice, for example, when you start eating your meal at a 2 on the hunger scale, very hungry, that you tend to eat way past satisfaction and contentment because your primal hunger is taken over. You may also notice when you begin your meals at a 6, you're not very hungry, but you're still eating. You don't enjoy the food as much. Did you know that food tastes better when you have subtle hunger? So when you're at that 3 or 4, food actually tastes better. So with that hunger discovery scale that you'll be working on now, and possibly through the rest of these modules, you're going to start to really ask yourself these questions on the slide and get to know when you tend to eat and really be more aware of what it feels like to eat at that comfortable hunger and eat until that comfortable fullness. What about those days when you have no appetite? Hunger is more physical, whereas appetite's more like a desire to eat. So have you ever had those days or moments when you should be hungry, and maybe you are, but you don't have a desire to eat? These times, it's really difficult to think about what to eat. Maybe you're sick or stressed, and you even notice hunger, but you just don't want to eat anything. it is still important to stay nourished. For some of you still trying to recognize your hunger at all, this may be the situation on most days. Not only do you not have really an appetite, but you're not even noticing hunger at all. A good tip might be to get those hunger cues and those hunger signals back, to set a reminder or a timer to eat every 4 to 5 hours. Getting yourself consistently nourished will help bring those hunger signals back, as well as working on those attunement disruptors that we talked about in previous slides. Let's talk about practical hunger. So, biological hunger isn't the only type of hunger you may listen to from day to day. Intuitive eating is not the hunger fullness diet where you should only eat when you feel physical hunger, and then stop when you're feeling physically full. Consider practical hunger, for example. Practical hunger can be described as those times you should eat even though your body isn't necessarily sending signals of hunger. In my own personal example, I will give you, there was a time when I was breastfeeding my daughter when I had no hunger signals. I was running on adrenaline. I absolutely had no hunger signals and also no appetite. But practically speaking, for many reasons, I knew I needed to keep my body nourished and to eat. So I set a timer to eat every 4 to 5 hours. Practically speaking, even though I didn't feel hunger or an appetite, I knew I still needed to eat. Another example I will use is if you're going into a really, really long meeting and you know that you're going to get hungry in the middle of that meeting. Before the meeting, you're not very hungry. You don't notice any hunger signals, but you know the meeting's going to be 2 or 3 hours. And by the end of that meeting, if you don't eat something now, you're going to be ravenous. So practically speaking, it makes sense to eat something before that meeting so that you don't feel ravenous and have that primal hunger take over by the end. We've learned to control and deny our hunger rather than to celebrate it. This is a quote from the book Body Respect. Think about this quote and imagine if it resonates with you. As I was on my personal journey to finding peace with food, I realized my hunger had gone dormant and it was silenced. And I wouldn't notice it until I was completely ravenous, which is, in the long run, for me, wasn't good. That primal hunger was always taking over. I started to make sure I ate more often, like I said previously, setting that timer for 4 to 5 minutes or 4 to 5 hours and then eating every 4 to 5 hours. And I really tried to start nourishing my body throughout the day, even if it meant eating when I did not feel physical hunger. And slowly my hunger came back and I started noticing it before I was ravenous. When I finally started to embrace hunger and not to deny it, things got really so much easier. Where before hunger made me anxious, I just tried to shift my mindset to more of a positive view of hunger. All in all, hunger is a sign that your body is working and doing exactly what it's supposed to do, telling you to eat. So hunger is a great thing. It's a sign that your body is working. Let's talk about taste hunger. Letting go of rules means also giving yourself permission, which we'll talk about at the next module. Like I said, intuitive eating is not the hunger fullness diet. Just like practical hunger means eating without necessarily being hungry physically for practical reasons, you'll also have times in your life when you aren't necessarily hungry, but something just sounds good or looks good. And it's okay to eat it without guilt. Because the moment guilt approaches is the moment you're likely to restrict because of your choices. And you're back in that cycle of restriction, eating past comfort, and then guilt. We'll discuss more about that in the next module. But for now, taste hunger means eating to fulfill a taste satisfaction. And guess what? You're allowed to fulfill taste hunger from time to time, even when you're not physically hungry. All right, let's talk about the general nutrition guidelines for nourishment included in your workbook on page 53. I want you to go ahead and pause and fill out page 53, my self-care nourishment plan 911. Now I'm going to go ahead and read numbers 1 through 4, some general guidelines when it comes to nourishment. Number 1 says the foods and meals you eat need to be adequate in energy and to sustain your body. Number 2, in general, it's best not to go longer than 4 to 5 hours without eating. So again, if you want to start setting a timer so you remember to nourish your body every 4 to 5 hours. Number 3, it's best that what you plan to prepare also matches your energy level at the time. So, don't try to plan a grandiose meal if you just don't have that energy. Eating just a small snack or a bar of some type, keep in mind the energy level that you have currently when deciding what to nourish your body with. And then number 4, a general pattern of eating that works is to have at least 3 meals and a morning and afternoon snack. So 3 meals and 2 snacks. This is a guideline, not a rule. So keep that in mind. Here are some simple nourishment ideas. Smoothies, and make them packed with protein, fat, fiber, some fruits or vegetables, protein from peanut butter or almond butter or milk. And then, of course, you've got your fiber with those fruits and vegetables, and the fat with peanut butter or nuts or seeds, or, of course, that milk that you choose as well. Packaged or convenient snacks can be very easy to add for nourishment. There's nothing wrong with convenient or packaged snacks, as long as you're enjoying them, right? And they bring you satisfaction. A frozen meal can be very convenient and usually very balanced. A piece of fruit and cheese, ready to heat up leftovers from the night before. A deli meat on a sandwich. You've got your carbohydrates, your protein, your fats. Cheese and crackers. All of these are hopefully satisfying to you, provide some protein, fat, or fiber, or at least one of those. And then carbohydrates are also going to add to that satisfaction. We just talked about those days or weeks when you struggle even noticing your hunger or finding time to eat. So, when your appetite is gone, or maybe your hunger is dormant. And we talked about how to get that hunger back and what to do if you're not feeling hunger or feeling an appetite. But what about the opposite? When you have days where you feel like you're hungry from dawn to dusk, what could be happening? Let's go ahead and read page 55. There are several things. Possibly the day before you had an unusually higher level of physical activity. Maybe you ate markedly less the day before. Maybe your breakfast at 7 o'clock was actually more of a snack than a meal. So it makes sense that even at 10 or 9, you're hungry again. Maybe you're just having a hungrier day. That's okay, right? You worked out early that morning, so your hunger was somewhat blunted, because exercise can blunt your hunger actually. So when you sat down for breakfast, you didn't eat enough. So now your hunger is actually showing up, so you're ravenous. Or maybe you have a physical condition such as premenstrual syndrome, which is making you hungrier than normal. So it's just important to remember, if you're noticing hunger signals, even if they seem constant, you should still eat, because your body knows what's best. So ever have those days when you feel hungry for what seems like an entire day? What's going on? Remember, there are several things that could be happening. Listening to your body and honoring those signals and not questioning them is going to be best. I'm going to bring your attention to page 56. Before pausing and doing this activity, I'm going to try to explain it a little bit. In this activity, you are going to review some statements that are similar to maybe some statements that you've made in the past. The purpose of this exercise is to get a better understanding of the difference between self-talk, or inner dialogue, that involves the mind, which reflects a thought, opinion, or judgment, versus a physical cue, like a body cue that reflects a direct experience or sensation from the body, hunger or fullness, versus a self-care cue, which reflects an action that takes care of your needs, but might also involve the mind. If you haven't guessed it already, we're going to try to work on choosing foods more based on body cues and self-care, versus making food decisions based on your mind or thoughts, opinions, and judgments. So on page 56, you're going to explore the difference between hunger, self-care, and thoughts. I want you to go ahead and pause until ready and fill out that worksheet. All right. Hopefully you went ahead and paused. And I want you to go ahead and review the answers on page 57 and see how you did. I'm also going to direct your attention to number 6, because it's one that I think is maybe something that you said to yourself before, and it reflects quite a lot. I'm going to read number 6 to you on page 56. Here is the statement. I did not exercise today, but I ate a lot of calories. That is a mind. That's an opinion, a thought, or a judgment. It was too many calories, considering I didn't even work out. Again, that is a thought, opinion, or judgment. But I was hungry all day, so I ate. The body cue, she recognized that she was hungry all day. That is a body cue. And then she took care of herself by eating. That is self-care. So I just wanted to give you an example. If you're reading through this and you're somewhat confused, we're actually going to come back to this at the way end, and hopefully it'll make a lot more sense. But for now, explore this worksheet, explore the answers, and see if you can relate to any of these statements and pinpoint whether they're mind, body cue, or self-care, and maybe even start to think about how you can change the statement to make it more neutral or more body cue and self-care statements. All right, that is the end of today's module. Further learning for this module, the Body Kindness book by Rebecca Scritchfield on page 54, The Hunger Tank. I really love that worksheet that she has in that book. And then I really recommend the Insight Timer Meditation app. If you want to really get more in tune with how your body feels, a good meditation practice is really helpful. I'm not talking about meditating for 30 minutes a day. Even 5 minutes once a week is a great place to start. Your assignments until next time. Page 51. Throughout this course, I really want you to fill in that hunger discovery scale journal and start to pay attention to when do you normally eat? Do you eat at a 3, a 5, a 2? Discover when you tend to eat your meals. Rate the quality of your hunger. Is it usually pleasant or is it unpleasant? Comment on how you feel after eating. Notice trends, fill in the reflections. And go ahead and make copies of this journal if you would like, if you want to do it for several weeks or months, because it only gives you a certain amount of space to fill out. Some mantras and intentions to think about between now and our next module. Continue being aware of negative self-talk and dialogue and any diet mentality thought that you have. A mantra might be, today I will show myself love, or my weight does not need controlled, or my body knows what's best. Actively pay attention to your attunement disruptors or your interoceptive awareness disruptors. A lack of self-care and nourishment, distraction while you're eating, lingering diet or diet beliefs or mentality, all of those can affect your ability to truly feel and listen to the needs of your body. I suggest putting a sticky note or two up on your mirrors, refrigerators, or anywhere you could use those positive reminders that I just reflected on in the previous slide. I hope you've enjoyed this module. Stay well, and remember to reach out to me at any time for questions or comments.